And to let the listeners know, for years, for 25 plus years, I've worked in aspects of clinical research, academic, hospital, overlaps of all of them, and within regulatory. So regulatory is the FDA oversight of foods, drugs, cosmetics, dietary supplements, medical devices, and a slew of other things, as well as the Federal Trade Commission, which is the agency of our government that regulates advertising/marketing. With the FDA and with the FTC as related to dietary supplements, there are overlaps. The easiest way to think about it is that the FDA regulates what's in the bottle, while the FTC regulates, in part, what is marketed about the bottle. But the FDA also regulates what's on the outside of the bottle, meaning the label. And that's where there's overlap. The claims that are made on a label are both regulated by FDA and FTC with different sets of regulations. Some overlapping regulations and some different sets. And also, like the label, supplement facts label is regulated by the FDA about what needs to be on it, in it, what font has to be used, and all of this other kind of stuff. And when it comes to dietary supplements, it's very important to understand and think about, that it is a regulated industry. It's actually more regulated than foods, more regulated than dietary, than cosmetics, more regulated than personal care, more regulated than medical devices, or differently, but more regulated than medical devices. And this fact gets lost, or these facts get lost a lot by media, where media likes to utilize clickbait mentality or clickbait marketing, clickbait whatever, because needing views and ad dollars and things like this. So I mention all of this because there are a lot of myths with consumers that are propagated by people that don't like industry, like class action lawyers. Some even by federal government and federal government agencies, which is done on purpose because they would like to expand their regulatory capabilities and regulatory hold or stranglehold. And things along those lines. So, Joey, you and I both became somewhat involved in the industry or research with dietary supplements before there was a Dietary Supplement Health Education Act, which was the 1994 law that made the FDA regulate dietary supplements as a subset of foods known as DSHEA. And dietary supplements are regulated not only by a federal act, right? The FFDC, so the Federal Food and Drug and Cosmetic Administration, right? The federal act. It's also regulated by DSHEA, also regulated under the rules of the Food Safety Modernization Act, the Foreign Supplier Verification Program. Now remember, and I mentioned Foreign Supplier Verification Program, and you might be thinking, what the heck does that have to do with my creatine in my protein shake? Well, anything that comes from outside the US for dietary ingredients, whether they are food ingredients, i.e. cinnamon that's going to be used to make muffins, or cinnamon that's being sold as an extract in a pill as a dietary supplement. If it's coming from outside the US, who and where it comes from has to be vetted by the FDA or an FDA certified agent or an agent that meets FDA criteria. There's a lot of ifs, ands, or buts there. But essentially, they have to be vetted and on the approved list. If not, then those ingredients can be stopped by the Customs and Border Patrol, which is also involved in the regulation of dietary supplements, right? And as well as the FDA. So there's a lot of people that have hands in dietary supplement regulation globally. And this is not thought about when some people go to, and I'll just use this for a common name, or their local health food store, local supplement store. Even these days, I buy most of my supplements at Publix, the supermarket that's close to me, because they sell them and they have fair prices.
Well, let me ask you this. No, this is great information. Really? I have to say that in addition to the myth of protein being bad for your kidneys, probably the second most common I hear is, oh, the supplement industry isn't regulated. And usually my response is, believe it or not, I think it's overregulated. But that's more of a political discussion than than really a scientific one. I think it's overregulated. They're like, oh, no, it's not regulated at all. No, as you sort of you walked us through those steps, there's a lot of regulation that goes on. And if you ever go into any manufacturing plant, you'll notice that the controls they put on manufacturing products is really fairly, it's quite stringent.
So a matter of fact, I'm sorry, Joey, to your point, when you're talking about manufacturing, there's what's known as Part 111 and Part 211 of the Code of Federal Regulations of the CFR Title 21 that regulate manufacturing facilities for pharmaceutical agents, which can be your over-the-counter Claritin to a regular prescription item, and for foods and / dietary supplements. The dietary supplement regulations, which is part of the good manufacturing practices, and part of this for Part 11 versus 211, are pretty much in, I think it's called lock and key with each other. So the importance of the manufacturing and the regulations are so similar that you really have to be impressed if you really understand the background for compliant manufacturing and what goes into the pill that's being, or powder, or whatever that the end user is taking.
A pragmatic question, Doug. What's allowed in terms of, if let's say you have a capsule that has multiple ingredients, and on the label it says, it has whatever 100 milligrams of caffeine or choline. How much error is there above and below what's on the label that's allowed? Is it per ingredient, or is there a flat, you could do plus or minus, 10% or 5% or whatever?
So it's kind of interesting, the question that you ask. And I say that because there are federal guidelines for what the error rate can be for things like calories, total fat, total carb, total protein, how much they're allowed to be off versus the food label, and as well as for the vitamins and minerals. But the other portion, other ingredients like a choline, which there's which is a nutrient that is definitely needed in the diet and needed for cognitive health and a whole bunch of other things, that there's two answers there. So for a manufacturer, first, when they are creating, let's say, their spec sheet for creating a product, a compliant manufacturer will put in what their target is and what their own error rate that they're looking for, what they find acceptable for themselves, which may or may not match, let's say, for example, the 10% range that's allowed by FDA. So, or 20%, depending upon what it is, 10%, 20%. There are differences. So, but nonetheless, you can either put it into like your specifications and your standard operating procedures that you are following, that your own guidelines, if there's not a federal guideline to follow. So, but in generally, we should look for things to be within no more than 20% off from their label claim.
And that's plus or minus.
Yes, sir.
For a substance like caffeine, where taking too much is more of an issue than not taking enough, do manufacturers, would they purposely not underreport, but err on the lower side? Excuse me.
I'm sorry, I don't really follow that question. So you're talking about caffeine.
Yeah, let's say, because let's say you're taking.
It's better for a manufacturer to underdose their caffeine than over, but still, because it's a litigious society, and you will have some law firms and others that will, if you're a popular caffeinated energy drink or popular product with caffeine, and you're using a supplement facts label or even a nutrition facts label, there is always a chance that somebody will buy a whole bunch of your products, send it out for testing, and know that if you're not within the stated range, that then you are defrauding the consumer, and your label is misleading. Mm-hmm. So there are law firms that specialize in those kind of class actions and do that kind of testing, but also companies are supposed to do their own quality control, quality assurance testing, on a lot by lot, batch by batch basis, and have a master batch record. So, however, if you are thinking about, is it better to be slightly over or slightly under? The answer is really, to me, part of that, part of the answer, going back from an education standpoint for a second, is the label claim that's made, whether it's percent RDA or how many milligrams of vitamin C or choline, has to also coincide to be true by the best buy date if you used a best buy date on your product. So, so if your best buy date says expires 9/2024, then your product has to meet that label claim by the end. It has to have what's called shelf life stability. And manufacturers are also supposed to, in their manufacturing, do shelf life stability testing. The FDA does allow accelerated testing that is done by units, research groups, that will essentially just take your product and put it in higher heat for a shorter time to see what happens. And they do a few other things, but it's an estimate of what would be true at that 1 year or 2 year time. So not only do you have to meet the label claim, but the label claim has to be true at the end of that date.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah. Cool
Tony,
stuff.
we're a little we're running short on time. I have a fun question for Doug, but I wanted to give you a chance if you wanted to pick Doug's brain on all the regulatory issues and anything else.
Well, I want to make a statement first that that was one of the more fascinating statements I think you're going to hear anywhere, because you don't hear it often. That is the extent to which OTC supplements for performance, largely, that's what we do, not exclusively, but largely, and health, of course, are highly regulated. I mean, you never hear that. I don't hear it anywhere. Now, sure, if we go to a conference in which that is the topic of discussion, yeah, but even at ISSN, we don't perhaps discuss this in as great as detail with as much frequency as we'd even like. And I think we do a nice job at ISSN, but I'd love everybody to hear that once again. It's fascinating to me that somebody with Doug's lineage in the industry, credentials, and knowledge, and I have to say, I don't know anyone better, can come out, make that statement, and you know what? I walk away with great confidence in it. So it's really more for me of a fascination with what we just heard than anything of a question other than I guess we could feel pretty good with the direction. I know this is quite a complicated yes or no answer, Doug, but generally, can we feel pretty good when we're buying most products about a reasonable, label claim efficiency? I mean, are we getting close to what they're saying based upon everything you noted to us?
Great question.
That's a great question. And here's what I'll tell you. And this is kind of common sense. First, in general, brands that have been around for what you might consider a long time have been around for a long time for a reason.
Okay,
and
good.
Typically part of that reason will include consistency in their quality control and product that they deliver, right? While you and I might think the Pop-Tarts of today taste different than the Pop-Tarts of when we were 1985 and 16, 17, 18 years old or whatever we were back then, that is different than, the quality control. So companies that have been around a long time are, obviously better ones if you're an uninformed consumer, but hey, I recognize this product, this brand, they've been around since I was a kid, that's a good thing to look for. I do believe in the power and validity of some of the certifications that are out there for products that they not only certify that they meet the law for good manufacturing practices, like certified GMP facility, but also certified for a label claim for meeting label claims and things like this have value. I think that if you are a higher echelon athlete, and this is not on an individual basis personally, but meaning that if you're a competitive athlete that is doing something that is drug tested, whether it's a one-on-one sport, like you're doing duathlons or something like that at a high level, Hawaiian Ironman triathlons, or you're a collegiate athlete or a professional, and you are going to be some sort of drug tested, it's just smarter to go to purchase the products that have been vetted to be free of banned substances.
And just remind us, Doug, the GMP for the facility itself and the label, what are they looking for?
On the label, I would look for, in America, these are the three easiest, and there might be more organizations to look for certified, that the products have been tested and they're certified free of banned substances. And if you have that certified GMP with that, it's great. So meaning that they could be informed choice or informed sport. They could be NSF certified for sport, or they could be BSBG, Banned Substance Control Group, certified for sport. Those are three organizations. I will let the listeners or watchers, viewers, know those are three of the 5 organizations that are globally endorsed and supported by USADA, the United States Anti-Doping Association, to be types of products that athletes should look for should they choose to use a dietary supplement.
Awesome.
Now, there's also the German, it's called German Cologne list. And then there's HASTA, which I believe is an association from Australia, that are the 2 other USADA approved organizations for certifying dietary supplements. It's also a myth that USADA is anti-supplement. Heck, it's in their book for when you work with USADA tested athletes, what they look for. Tony and I have both received, every year we get the UFC updated list, the UFC PI, UFC updated list of all of this stuff. And one other thing that I wanted to mention, I know we have to close for time, from a regulatory standpoint, is 2 other things quickly, is within regulations are things as related to claims are called structure function claims. And that is a claim that you'll see about a product, on a product, where it's discussing how a specific ingredient affects either the structure or function of a physiologic reaction in the body, right? Take creatine, you can increase intramuscular phosphocreatine. Vitamin C, antioxidant function. Although there's actually a definition of what you could call antioxidant in the regulations too. So those are kind of things I want you to think of. And separately, besides these federal guidelines, the whole industry is also regulated by states. So for example, the state of California has their own laws, like every other state, but in there, there's a law that affects every industry that's known as the Prop 65 law. So any product in the Prop 65 law in California is a list of ingredients that no matter how the data was obtained, that the California will declare these list of ingredients are known to the state of California to be carcinogenic. Now, some of the ingredients that are listed in there have only been carcinogenic in a petri dish, but are not in people. Or some have only been when they're given out like 500 times a human dose to a rodent. So now any company that sells a product that's also sold in California, they also have to, by regulation, put a Prop 65 warning now on their product somehow, somewhere. And, so these things all affect the industry, and it's very regulated. I'm happy to talk to anybody about this when we're at the ISSN annual conference in June, and everybody should sign up now and make sure you get your hotel all squared away. And of course for anybody. So thank you for these questions.
Yeah, definitely get your hotel squared away, because people always email me at the last minute. Hey, I need a hotel room. Hey, that conference is 1 week away. Maybe you should have done that like a long time ago. So
but
Doug,
you don't control Hilton,
and Doug will be there,
Wyndham or the Westin. You don't control all of the hotel industry.
I'll say Dr. Kalman has an extra bed. You could stay in his room.
No. My wife won't like that. Asher won't like that.
To close out, Doug, whether you apply this to endurance athletes, strength power athletes, or somewhere in the continuum, your top 5 sports supplements for, it could be however you want to frame it. So your top 5 supplements, I would think creatine's up there. So
big 5.
Give me your 4.
Okay, I'm going to exclude protein, because protein is a macronutrient, and depending upon how the companies sell it, they can use either a nutrition facts label or a supplement facts label.
True.
Doesn't really matter.
Right.
So creatine, fish oil,
All right.
Sushi.
Vitamin D,
Ooh, okay.
Sunshine.
multivitamin,
I take that. One a day for old men.
I have a conditional one depending upon the athlete. And that conditional one is beta alanine.
Ah,
Yeah.
I love it. Yes. And
So since
explain
you
quick-
limited me to those,
explain the
um,
condition for beta alanine so that the audience knows.
well, in general, if you read the ISSN position stand and data support regarding beta alanine seems to have its most effect. It acts as a cellular buffer, intracellular buffer. So think of beta alanine as a Tums for your muscle for when there's a lot of an accumulation of hydrogen ions and acids that start altering the pH of the muscle intracellularly. Beta alanine acts as a stage 2 buffer. So it allows you to go a little bit harder, longer before your muscles tap out and ask for a little bit of a break. In sports, this translates to sporting activities that are generally about 1 to 4 minutes in duration. So if you think about using creatine and increasing intramuscular creatine and even serum circulating creatine, creatine has its greatest ability for things that are 8 to 12 seconds or so in output. So if Tony and I are boxing, generally most hard throws are no more than 8 to 10 seconds, 15 seconds if somebody's going all day hitting somebody, right? So those bursts, creatine will allow you to repeat those bursts because you have more intramuscular. But those rounds can be 2 minutes, 3 minutes, or 5 minutes. And so beta alanine helps act as that buffer to allow your muscles to continue to do its physiologic function at a higher output level longer during that duration, because it acts as an intracellular buffer where, believe it or not, creatine has some extracellular buffering capacity as well.
Awesome. So, I mean, so in summary, though, despite the fact that it may have no value in hypertrophy athletes, according to some recent research, and hypertrophy athletes to me is an oxymoron, but it has an effect in real athletes.
Aren't you hypertrophic as a result of your athletic endeavor?
If you're a real athlete, yes.
I'm not going to get involved with that reel. I don't want to get a beat down.
I'll take the beat down.
I will say
I'll take the beat down.
But what I will say is, my boxing days might be behind me. I'm not sure.
But boxing is a real athlete.
But beta, but with that, to me, when I look at sports, and I've had baseball players ask me about it, I don't see the utility.
Right.
You're playing center field.
You don't even move.
You're going to be there for longer than 4 minutes, but you're not sprinting or running at a higher capacity for 3 minutes. You're running for 10 seconds.
Exactly. Yeah, and I was just being a wise guy. My point is, if it doesn't do much in 8 to 12 reps at an average of 3 sets, 3 seconds a rep, 4 seconds, I understand that because some research shows it doesn't. But for those, the analogies that you gave, or the, in the repetitive bouts, 3, 4, 5 minutes, it should be a great supplement.
Tone, in the weightlifting community where it may have some potential, and I'm not familiar if there's research data on this, on something that on one of those things where I'm not naming anything, but one of those things where it's a workout of the day, a high intense interval that's a timed, that's 20, 25 minutes in length, but you're going station to station to station to station.
Yes.
One of those kind of workouts, I could see some potential utility.
Absolutely.
Right? But something where you're, a Zumba class, I'm not so sure about.
Right.
I don't think that. Yeah, no Zumba for that. So before I let you go, Doug, I want to mention the ISSN conference, June 15 to 17, Fort Lauderdale Beach. Be there, register at ISSN.net. That's ISSN.net. Dr. Ricci, Dr. Kalman, thank you. It's been a great show. The regulatory stuff is super
awesome.
Cool. And it's much appreciated. So have
Thank you, Doug.
awesome evening, guys. Thanks.